You sit in your room long after everyone else has gone to bed, the glow of your phone the only light. Your mind loops over conversations that happened hours ago, maybe days, picking apart words, gestures, silences. You wonder if they noticed, if they remembered, if you mattered at all. And yet, there's something quietly compelling about that exact moment, that private swirl of thought you can't seem to escape. Why do some of us linger here, in the spaces between people and screens, between memory and imagination, unable to let go? If you were born between 1976 and 1985, you belong to a curious slice of humanity, a microgeneration that doesn't quite fit anywhere. You're too old to be called a millennial, too young to be comfortably Gen X. Some researchers call you Xennials, or even the betweeners. But labels don't capture the strange, subtle tension of growing up in two worlds at once, analog and digital, tactile and virtual. The question is, what does it do to your mind to straddle that boundary? Your childhood might have been a world of paper diaries, handwritten notes passed quietly in class, and the slow dread of missing your favorite TV show. Miss it, and it was gone forever, leaving only memory to hold on to. Boredom was a thing you sat with, silence was expected. But somewhere between late teens and early 20s, the world flipped. Phones got smaller, screens got brighter, and suddenly, everything you wanted to say could be typed and sent instantly, to anyone, anywhere. Friendster, MySpace, Facebook, and with each app, each notification, the rules of connection changed. Think about that. For years, you experienced a life where showing up was the only plan you had. Your friends weren't just a ping away. They were somewhere out there, waiting, maybe late, maybe not, and you had to trust that they'd be there. That trust, that patience, shaped the way you felt about people and time. Then adulthood arrived, and along with it, a barrage of constant connection. The same person who once relied on presence and intuition now navigates unread messages, social feeds, and digital echoes of conversations that never really end. It's no wonder some of you overthink. It's no wonder some of you feel intensely. The world demanded adaptation before your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that figures out social nuance and self-control, was fully matured. You were primed to learn, but the lessons were dizzyingly fast. Remember the last video we did on the "to mature child" phenomenon? That idea about overthinkers who never stop replaying childhood patterns. There's a quiet overlap here. Xennials tend to carry the echoes of their youth, those small, formative analog experiences, into their adult digital lives. Maybe it shows in the way you avoid eye contact with strangers in elevators, or how a silence in a text thread can feel heavy, almost unbearable. The curiosity of the unknown, the anxiety of what isn't seen lingers. You've learned to dwell in your own thoughts, often deeper than anyone else, simply because the world once forced you to wait. There's a subtle duality to living in both eras. You're comfortable with tech. You grew up watching it emerge. But you also remember what it was like to be truly unreachable. That 7th grade heartbreak, that wild night with friends, that secret joy of a private joke, all existed without a trace online. And in your 30s, 40s, or even late 20s, you carry both memories, the analog past and the hyper-connected present. It creates what I can only describe as a kind of emotional bilingualism. You can talk to someone face to face without distraction, but also adapt effortlessly to new software, new social norms, new ways of communicating. It's rare, and it's invisible to most people. Sometimes late at night, your mind drifts to those spaces where life once felt slower. The dark room, the quiet, the hum of your own breathing. Perhaps you've caught yourself scrolling endlessly, not for content, but out of habit. An unconscious attempt to fill the silence. Or maybe you've sat in the glow of your phone, reading a message a dozen times before responding, analyzing tone, intention, and possible outcomes. You are not alone. Many Xennials exist here, balancing sensitivity with adaptability, thoughtfulness with curiosity. Economic uncertainty shaped some of you too. Maybe you entered the workforce around the 2008 financial crisis, learning quickly that security is fragile, and that adaptability isn't just a skill, it's a necessity. Your decisions often carry that invisible weight, the lessons of what could crumble if you're not careful. There's a quiet tension in your choices, a whisper of, what if, that others may not notice. And yet, you keep moving, keep navigating, keep thinking, perhaps more than anyone should. Have you noticed how small moments can feel monumental? A friend's unread message can spiral into 1,000 internal narratives. A missed call can linger like a shadow over your day. You replay conversations in your mind, imagining every nuance, every hidden meaning. You aren't obsessive. You're processing a world that once demanded patience, that now demands instantaneous reaction. And that internal processing, that overthinking, is a hallmark of being Xennial. We often don't talk about the psychological depth of your generation. Culture pits Gen X against Millennials, as if anyone born between 1965 and 2000 can be lumped into tidy boxes. But Xennials live in paradox. You hold contradictions effortlessly. You are independent but cooperative, skeptical but optimistic, digital yet analog. You know the thrill of being alone with your thoughts, yet the comfort of instant connection. That tension, between patience and immediacy, solitude and hyperconnectivity, is not anxiety. It's adaptation. And yet there's a mystery here. Why do some of you still linger on moments that have long passed? Why do certain silences feel heavier than they should? Maybe it's not a flaw. Maybe it's a unique kind of awareness, a sensitivity forged in the overlap of two worlds. Sometimes I wonder if this is why so many Xennials drift into reflection. Long walks alone. Late nights staring at ceiling lights, whispering inner conversations with themselves that no one else can hear. It's a strange, private inheritance. I think about quiet mornings, when the house is still, when the only sound is the hum of the fridge or the ticking of a clock. How many of those mornings have you spent thinking about who you were yesterday, last year, or even decades ago? You notice the details others might overlook, the faded pattern of a wallpaper, the way light hits a mirror, the small things that make life feel lived. That observation, that careful noticing, comes from being neither fully here nor fully there, a bridge between eras, a guardian of both memory and possibility. Sometimes you catch yourself avoiding eye contact, not out of shyness, but to hold the space for your own thoughts. You linger in the pauses between people's words, letting silence sink in, letting meaning reveal itself slowly. You replay scenarios in your head, not to torment yourself, but to understand the world as it moves too quickly for others to notice. It's what makes you different, and what keeps you grounded in the midst of constant change. And so, maybe the most interesting thing about Xennials isn't just how you adapted, or how you survived, or even how emotionally sensitive you are. It's that you carry the tension of your past into the present, quietly observing, quietly thinking, quietly asking the questions no one else remembers to ask. What does it mean to be patient in an impatient world? To be alone yet connected? To feel deeply while moving quickly? These questions linger unresolved, echoing like footsteps in a hallway no one else can see. Perhaps that's the gift of your generation, not certainty, not answers, but the ability to hold contradiction and sit with it, to notice what others overlook, and to feel the weight of small moments without being crushed by them. You have learned, in your own quiet way, that the world is always in flux, and maybe that's why some nights in the dark, you still return to the glow of your phone, the hum of your own mind, and the silent questions that refuse to leave. The mystery remains. The questions linger, and maybe that's exactly where you're meant to be. You remember the way afternoons used to stretch, slow and golden, when the world outside your window felt like a place you could actually reach, but only by walking or biking there. You might have spent hours in the backyard, a notebook in hand, doodling, writing, imagining worlds that existed entirely inside your head. There was no phone buzzing in your pocket, no app demanding your attention, no endless scroll that could pull you out of yourself. You knew your friends only by the hours you spent together, the notes you passed, the games you played in silence or in laughter. A misstep in a conversation couldn't be edited or deleted. The memory lingered, sharpened by repetition, until you learned its patterns by heart. That was your analog childhood, where everything had to be felt fully, experienced in real time, with consequences that couldn't be undone with a tap of a finger. And yet, even in those slow, tactile days, there was a sense of impending change. Maybe it was the first time you saw a computer in a classroom, clunky and blinking, a strange portal to a world you didn't yet understand. Maybe it was a moment standing in an electronics store, staring at the first game consoles, the bright buttons and flashing screens, promising something beyond your imagination. Or maybe it was just noticing that your parents' rotary phone, with its deliberate clicks and dials, was gradually being replaced with something smaller, sleeker, faster. You were witnessing a shift, even if you couldn't name it at the time. By the time your late teens arrived, the world you knew had begun to tilt. Suddenly, screens glowed in ways they never had before. The internet crept into your life like a whisper, then a roar. Friendster, MySpace, early Facebook, each one offering the seductive promise of connection, of knowing more, faster, easier. A world that once required patience and effort, a world where showing up mattered more than typing out a message, had been replaced by instant feedback loops, digital visibility, and social calculation. You moved from the slow rhythm of handwritten notes to the rapid ping of notifications. Conversations that once faded into memory were now stored, searchable, permanent. Your teenage patience became a skill almost forgotten, replaced with the constant nudge of immediacy, the expectation that a response would arrive before the thought even finished forming. The strange thing is, you adapted. You learned to live in both worlds at once. You remember the tactile satisfaction of flipping a page in a book, of drawing something you could touch, of hearing a friend's voice on a corded phone. And at the same time, you learned to navigate digital spaces effortlessly, to create online identities, to understand the subtle social rules that governed each platform. You saw the emergence of a culture where visibility equaled validation, where the world could be reached with a click. But you also understood what it meant to be unreachable, to exist fully in moments that no one else could archive or observe. Living in this in-between space shaped something fundamental about the way you process life. You can reflect deeply on experiences, notice patterns that others overlook, dwell in subtleties. You are aware of the textures of silence, the pauses between words, the things that are never said but always felt. You can sit in a quiet room and let your thoughts drift, unbothered by the fear of missing out, but you also know how to harness technology to create, communicate, and connect when necessary. It's a duality that no generation before or after has experienced so intensely, a constant negotiation between patience and immediacy, presence and availability. This tension shows up in daily life in ways that often go unnoticed. Maybe it's the way you hesitate before sending a message, weighing tone, intent, and timing because you've learned both worlds' rules. Maybe it's the way you sit with a problem for longer than necessary, exploring it from multiple angles, because in your analog past, solutions required thought, trial, and patience. Or maybe it's in your relationships, how you can appreciate both physical presence and digital closeness. How you understand intimacy in ways younger generations who never knew true analog connection can't fully grasp. You hold space for contradiction, and you do it without thinking. Even the way you remember your past is shaped by this dual existence. Childhood memories are fluid, partially reconstructed from emotion and imagination, because nothing was permanently documented. Teenage experiences are vivid yet fragmented, like snapshots your mind holds onto selectively. Adulthood, however, is increasingly recorded, archived, and observable. You navigate these contrasting modes of memory every day, a mental dance between what was ephemeral and what is permanent. And this has subtle consequences for self-perception, for trust, for the way you approach relationships and opportunities. You are constantly comparing worlds you have known and worlds you are discovering. There is also a quiet, psychological rhythm that emerges from this straddling of eras. Late nights can feel heavier, because your thoughts are accustomed to long stretches without interruption. Yet your habits have adapted to constant digital input. A silence in a room can feel both comforting and unsettling. An unread message might spiral into reflection, not out of insecurity, but because you have learned to dwell in thought, to replay scenarios, to consider countless possibilities before acting. You are a master of internal dialogue, finely tuned to nuance, a creature of reflection shaped by the analog patience of childhood and the digital demands of adulthood. And when you pause, sometimes it hits you. No other generation has experienced this quite the way you have. Others may understand technology or nostalgia, patience or connection, but few have lived both fully at such formative moments. You carry the lessons of waiting alongside the skills of rapid adaptation, the emotional depth of introspection alongside the social fluency of digital spaces. You are always balancing, always negotiating, always inhabiting a space between eras that most people only glimpse from afar. You remember walking down the street after school, your backpack bouncing against your shoulders, wondering if your friends would actually be there at the park. No messages had confirmed it. No group chat pinged your phone, just a vague promise from earlier in the day. You didn't know if they were late, distracted, or had simply forgotten. And yet, you went anyway. Because that's what you did. You showed up and somehow, most of the time it worked out. That simple act of trusting that someone else would honor their word without a reminder shaped something fundamental about the way you see the world. It wasn't taught in any classroom, wasn't something written down in a manual, but it quietly sculpted the architecture of your trust, your patience, your understanding of relationships. There was no instant feedback, no notification to reassure you that someone cared, no digital safety net. You learned early that connections weren't guaranteed, that they required attention, effort, and presence. And because you couldn't control what other people would do, you developed a kind of internal compass, a way of navigating uncertainty without crumbling. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it surfaces in your adult life in ways you might not even notice. You instinctively know how to read between the lines, sense when someone is committed or distracted, and understand that presence matters more than words. Think about how different that feels compared to today, where a missed text can trigger anxiety, a delayed reply can feel like rejection. Your childhood experiences weren't mediated by apps or screens. They were raw and immediate. If someone said they'd meet you at the corner at 4, they either showed up or they didn't. There was no proof, no record, no way to check if they were just running late. And in that space of uncertainty, you learned patience. You learned to reconcile disappointment, to accept ambiguity, to maintain trust even when outcomes weren't guaranteed. It's no surprise then that as Xennials, trust operates differently for you. You approach friendships, romantic relationships, and even professional connections with a quiet sense of discernment. You can gauge reliability because you lived in a world where actions spoke louder than promises. You remember the weight of someone being there when it mattered, and you carry that memory forward. And at the same time, you recognize absence, inconsistency, and half-hearted attempts. You are neither naive nor cynical. You're tuned to the subtle rhythms of human reliability, the things that can't be captured by notifications or status updates. This pattern also affects how you handle your own commitments. You don't take promises lightly. When you say you'll be somewhere, or do something, it carries weight. You understand that trust is earned in increments, that showing up, again and again, builds invisible threads that hold people together. And because you experienced a childhood where no one could text you from afar, you also learned to rely on yourself. You discovered self-reliance alongside relational trust. You could entertain yourself, solve problems on your own, and navigate uncertainty without constant guidance. That combination, trust in others tempered by trust in yourself, is a quiet superpower of your generation. Even small, everyday moments carry echoes of that learning. You might hesitate before responding to a vague message, reading between the lines for intent, timing, or reliability. You might notice the subtleties of someone's tone on the phone, or the way they arrange plans, remembering the unspoken lessons of your youth. You weigh actions over words, presence over promises, and you do it without thinking. It's embedded in your approach to relationships. There's a reason why Xennials often value long-standing friendships and deep connections over casual or fleeting interactions. You've internalized a sense of relational patience and presence that younger generations, raised in instant response cultures, sometimes struggle to grasp. There's a quiet tension too, because this pattern can make you hyper-aware of the fragility of trust. You know how easily connections can slip away when they're not nurtured, and that awareness can be both protective and isolating. You remember the disappointment of a friend who didn't show up, the fleeting sadness of plans that fell through, and the way those small ruptures felt monumental. And because those memories are encoded so deeply, you often carry them forward, not as baggage, but as guides for how you engage with the world. This also intersects with the digital world in fascinating ways. While you adapted seamlessly to social media and instant messaging, the instincts forged in your childhood remain. You understand that a ping or a like is not the same as presence. You can hold conversations that stretch over hours or days without losing attention or emotional resonance. You can sit in a room silently with a friend and know the bond is intact. That ability to measure human connection without the crutch of constant affirmation is rare, and it comes directly from those formative, show up and hope experiences. And sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet, the contrast hits you. You scroll through endless notifications, read messages that could have waited, and think about the way relationships once required something more tangible, more immediate, more visceral. The phone glows softly in the dark, but it cannot replicate the texture of a presence felt, a promise kept, a friend actually arriving at the park at the exact time they said they would. That memory lingers like a quiet rhythm in your mind, shaping the way you move through life, shaping the trust you extend and the trust you withhold, shaping the way you understand reliability in a world that often feels instantaneous, fleeting, and ephemeral. And as you reflect on it, you realize that this duality, the blend of patience and adaptation, absence and presence, uncertainty and expectation, is one of the defining threads of your generation. It isn't something you learned in a seminar or read in a book. It was lived, internalized, and carried forward into adulthood. It manifests in subtle habits, in the way you weigh commitments, in the way you navigate relationships, in the way you hold yourself accountable, even when no one else is watching, in the way you notice what others often overlook.